So Julio Carvalho is the founder and co-director of the Spiritist Center Divine Light, located in Newark, New Jersey. He is also a member of the Tri-State Spiritist Federation, where he works actively in the Department of Public Speaking, providing training courses for Spiritist workers. Each year, he participates in the national and international congresses representing the USA and the Tri-State Spiritist Federations. Professionally, he is a licensed clinical social worker with 20 years experience in public speaking in the field of mental health, group administration, and emotional well-being. He has worked for Trinitas Regional Medical Center at Union County Jail for the past 12 years. And currently, he is a psychotherapist for Compassionate Care Hospice. Academically, he's a trained stationary engineer, has a bachelor in biology, and a master's degree in social work at King University. Additionally, to his public speaking prowess, he was the first ever in the social work department to be selected for the honor of the graduate class commencement speech. In that regards, we want to add that he also graciously shares with us his talent of reciting poems. Moreover, let's add that Júlio translates poetry facing the challenges of interpreting the layers of meaning of the source poems and bringing a faithful and enjoyable English literary text to our ears. He has spoken in many states in the US, and because he speaks 4 languages, he regularly attends to speaking engagements abroad as well. He's married for 14 years and has 2 children. Thank you, Júlio, and the stage is yours, my friend.
I'm afraid that the biography is longer than the lecture. Who had all this stuff?
Got longer with time.
You know, let's start by wishing everyone peace in our hearts. At times, for those who are not accustomed to public speaking, they might believe that speaking for a small group, it's easier than speaking for a larger group. But in reality, it's just the opposite. Reason being is because when you're speaking to a smaller group, they are more self-aware. But we are hiding behind our screens so you guys are comfortable. And I try to keep you guys entertained for the next 50 minutes. I guess this is what you want, right? 50 minutes. And thank you so much for your presence. Thank you for inviting me. And in regards to us being a small group, I am very thankful for the job I had at Union County Jail. And let me explain to you why. Every Wednesday and Thursday, I did lectures for the inmates. And I gave a list for the correctional officer to call the inmates to attend my lecture. So if the correctional officer had a good breakfast, his wife kissed him goodbye when he went to work, and his boss greeted him with happiness, and he was having a good day, he called everybody on that list. So I had 30 inmates to listen to the lecture, which for the prisoner standards, it's a big lecture. Now, when that officer did not have a good breakfast and his wife did not kiss him and goodbye, and he arrived late and his boss screamed at him, I gave him a list with 35 names and he called 4 people. So I had those 4 individuals there for an hour and 20 minutes. And they trained me really well not to be bothered with numbers, but just to do my best with whoever shows up. So I'm very thankful to them for all those years of training in that regard. So the topic that was requested is the challenges of self-knowledge. And before we begin, let me just say that I do not mean to patronize anyone. I don't know what you know. And because I don't know what you are aware, I have to break down the material into very small details. That's another, I would say, a rhetoric addiction that I have acquired in the jail system, because most of the inmates who are listening to me, they barely finished high school. So I had the challenge of explaining to them complex material in a very elementary way. So I got addicted to that. So please, I ask you to kindly not misinterpret my intention. I just don't know what you know, so I'll break down into details. The challenges of self-discovery, the challenges of self-knowledge. Why is it such a challenge to make a self-discovery or have a self-knowledge? Well, first of all, let's discuss why is it even important to know who we are, to have this self-knowledge. What's the point of that? Why is it that we want to know the deeper parts of ourselves? So because you are a Spiritist group, if I had someone new here, I'll take this talk in a completely different direction. But since I know everyone here is a Spiritist, we all know that Allan Kardec was very systematic with his questions. He was an educator. And the purpose of an educator is to teach by all means possible. And what some people do not realize is that there is so much knowledge in the question alone, because these questions were placed in a such way that one can draw information way before we get to the answer. And at times, people read the Spirit's book, they get into the answers without even realizing what the question was asking to begin with. So they miss so much information by not paying attention to what the question is asking. And in regards to self-knowledge, he was deeply interested in this subject. And the reason is, well, the question itself demonstrates why he was so concentrated in this topic, because he asks, in question 919, what is the most efficient way to improve ourselves in this lifetime and to resist the draw of evil? The original question, which was elaborated in French, it has an additional word which means practical. What is the most practical and efficient way to improve ourselves in this lifetime and to resist the draw of evil? Now, this question, we can break it into two different parts, because he is asking, how to improve ourselves and to resist the draw of evil. But then he's not asking for just about any means to improve ourselves, but he's interested in the most practical and efficient. Now, what does it mean to be practical or have a practical means to achieve something? Well, the word practical here means that it's applicable, it's feasible, one can actually do it. There are many different means to do many different things, but if you want to do it, you want to make sure that it's practical. Why make it hard when you can actually have an easier way to do the same thing? For example, I was reading a magazine of this guy who was addicted to heroin. And he fought for many years with this addiction. He basically lost his entire 20s. So one day he said that he was sitting inside his cell 442 of the jail that he was in, and he was reading about marathon. And he learned that a marathon is about 26.2 miles. It's a lot of distance to cover, and the training is very hard. So he said to himself, you know, if I don't change who I am, I'm going to spend my 30s just the way I spent my 20s in the jail system, in and out, in and out. So what he did, he said, you know what, maybe I tried all these different methods and that did not work. Maybe marathon will work for me. So once again, he was released from jail and he began training really hard to actually keep up the stamina of running for 26.2 miles. So he did all his training. He was fully prepared for it. And the day he went to register for the race, guess which number he picked? They gave him the number 442. What a coincidence of life that the same number that he was housed in the jail system was the number that he was receiving to place in his shirt so he could run. And he ran, and obviously he did not finish first. That was not the objective. You know, people who finished first in those races, they are professional runners. That's what they do for a living. But he indeed finished the race. And that gave him a sense of accomplishment. It gave him the faith in himself that if he sets a goal for himself, he will achieve it if he put his mind and heart to it. That's what that race did for him. So the question is, does marathon race helps you quit heroin? Yes, it does. But is it a practical means? No, it's not. It's very hard to run a marathon race. You know, for those who are looking to lose weight, for example, you know, summer comes up here in the US. I don't know about Canada. It's very different over there. But here we have tons of people eating junk food in the winter days. And then the summer's coming up and everyone wants to lose weight. And there are so many different methods to lose weight. You can even lose weight by jumping from an airplane, or you can climb mountains. You know, can you do that? Yes, you can. Is it practical? No, it's not practical. So what the word practical mean here is it's feasible. One can actually do it. It's workable. That's what the word practical. But Allan Kardec was not only concerned with self-knowledge of being practical, of improving ourselves in a practical way. That he was also concerned that whatever practical way that we chose, it was also efficient. And what does the word efficient stands for? Well, you get to the result as soon as possible. That's what efficient is. You produce result. So now we understand the first part. What is the most practical, applicable, feasible way and efficient way to improve ourselves in this lifetime? So that's what the first part is asking us, the most practical and efficient way to improve ourselves. And then the second part is, and to resist the draw of evil. Now, obviously, evil here does not refer to an entity per se. It's not referring to the devil. It's not referring to this allegorical figure that was portrayed by us for the past centuries in order to curb our negative intentions. That's not what evil stands here in this context. We all know, Spiritists, that this entity does not exist. Evil here, it's anything that inhibits our progress, anything that harms us emotionally, physically, spiritually. So let's say I have a sugar addiction. And with my sugar addiction, I develop diabetes. It gets to a point that there is so much insulin that my pancreas can produce to control my sugar level. And that after a while, what happens, the pancreas can't do it anymore. So now there's less insulin for the same amount of sugar. And once again, I don't know about the Canadians, but here in the US, some people love carrot cake. And this is a way to fool their minds. They like the carrot cake because there's a picture of a carrot there, and they think they're eating healthy. Now, let me just remind you that this is a vegetable drawn by sugar. It's made up of sugar. There's no vegetable in there. It's just a picture. But people fool themselves and they eat carrot cake here. So if I have diabetes, what is evil for me? Carrot cakes. If I have diabetes, what's evil? Ice cream, anything that has excess sugar. So how can I resist the draw of evil? That's what the question is asking. So now we know, we have somehow a clear picture of what the question is asking. What is the most efficient means? What is the most practical and efficient means to improve ourselves and to resist anything that does us harm, anything that will bring us down, the draw of evil? And now here comes the answer. A sage of antiquity has told you, know thyself. Now, look at the answer. It says, a sage of antiquity has told you. Constantine was the person who actually answered this question. And he's referring to a sage of antiquity that we know is Socrates. Socrates lived approximately 750 years before Christ. So that's the first information we get from this answer, that whatever we have to do to improve ourselves and to resist the jaw of evil, we know for a long time. This is not new information to us. We have known this throughout different philosophies, maybe by not the same use of words, but it's definitely an information that we know for a long time, because these themes are recurrent in different religious tradition. If one study Hinduism, for example, which is known for scholars to be the oldest religion ever known. If one studies Taoism, for example, religion from China, if we study Buddhism, which stemmed from Hinduism, if we study Judaism, in all these isms, that has a component of truth, not the absolute truth, but the relative truth, one will find out these truths. For example, self-knowledge, the importance of knowing who we are. So now that we know the answer, Socrates gave to us 750 years before Christ, so almost for 3,000 years we know this information, through Socrates. It begs the question, why is it that the most efficient means to improve ourselves and to resist the jaw of evil is self-knowledge? Why is that? Well, that's because one cannot fix what we don't know that is broken. I cannot fix something that is not broken. So if someone is sick, if your car breaks down, if a machine that you have at home has a problem, the most important step here, it's the diagnosis, pinpointing what the problem is. And reason being is because if I have a wrong diagnosis for a patient, I will actually establish the course of treatment based on this wrong diagnosis. I'm treating the patient for a disease that he or she doesn't have. If I take my car to the mechanic and I have a problem with the alternator, if the mechanic thinks is the starter, he would change 100 starters and I'll still have the same problem. So ideally, the first step is to know what the problem is in order to be fixed. So the most practical, efficient means to improve ourselves is to know who we are, so we know what needs to be fixed. So I have established the first part of this lecture. Why is it even important to have self-knowledge? And that's the reason, because we understand that the cause of our pain, the cause of our misery lies within us. And if we know specifically what those causes are, we can work on them. But if I ignore that I am the cause of my pain, of my misery, I will spend the rest of my life pointing fingers at everybody, blaming them for being the cause of my pain. And the main problem with that picture is that if I see them as being the cause of my problem, I also see them as being the solution to my problem. And I will only prolong my pain because I'm expecting these people to change in order for my life to improve. You see, where we see the cause of our problem is also where we see the solution to the problem. For example, if I take my car to the mechanic and the problem is with the alternator, what's the solution to my problem? Change the alternator. If the problem is with the battery, what's the solution to the problem? Change the battery. So when it comes to emotional and relationships, if I see that my ex-boss is the cause of my problem, what's the solution? Change my boss. If I believe that it's my mother-in-law, change my mother-in-law. If I believe that the source of my pain is my husband, change my husband. And can these people change? Can I tell these people, change in order for my life to improve? No, they would not change. Please don't get me wrong. People do change, not to please you, to please themselves. So if I blame them for my pain, all I'm doing, I am prolonging my misery because I'm expecting these people who are not going to change to change. And as a result of this expectation, I develop a symptom, a very disturbing symptom that we label as anxiety. And what is anxiety? Anxiety is when you want something to change, when you want something to happen, when you want something to occur, but it doesn't. And what anxiety do to people is that anxiety changes our perception of time. When you are anxious, time goes by very slow. I don't know if you have waited for someone at the airport in Vancouver, someone that you love very much. And, let's say there is this married couple and they live in Vancouver and they actually live, close to hell. And where is that? Well, inside their mother-in-law's home. It could be very likely like hell. And one day she says, I am tired of this. Please, we need to get a place of our own. Let's get out of here. But things are so hard financially. We depend on our mom. I'm so sorry. And, it goes back and forth. And one day he comes home and says, I have a solution for our problem. There's good news and bad news. And what's the good news? We'll finally be able to purchase our home. Well, what's the bad news? Well, I have to go overseas for a whole year. And then the company is going to pay me a lot more. And then she says, oh, please don't. No, I'm not going to survive here without you, with your mom. Are you crazy? Please don't go. But they had this conversation back and forth, and she finally realizes this is good. It's going to be a good thing. They'll be able to purchase their own home. And she says, yes, go ahead. So now he goes overseas, and they talk every day over the phone. She misses him so much. He misses her so much. And then within 3 months, he calls her and says, I got a break here. I'll be able to spend 5 days with you. Pick me up at the airport tomorrow at 7 o'clock. What time does she wake up to pick him up at 7 o'clock at the airport? 4, 3 o'clock? Well, she doesn't wake up because she never went to sleep to begin with. She spent the entire night awake, so anxious she can't go to sleep. That's how excited she feels. So she gets there at 5 o'clock and she's waiting for those 2 hours at the airport. And she's counting each minute. She's feeling all the pain of each second. And then it's 6:50. The airplane is about to land. And then she looks at the monitor and says, airplane delayed. He's going to get here Not at 7 o'clock, but 9 o'clock. So now she has to wait an additional 2 hours at the airport. So she paces back and forth. She doesn't know what to do with herself. And then it's finally 9 o'clock. When that guy comes out of the airplane, if it's Steven Spielberg is around, it's going to be like a guarantee Oscar. You know, they hug and they kiss and they go home. And you know what they do, right? They go out for ice cream and all sorts of things. We're all adults here. So they spend 5 days having ice cream. And they're so happy with each other. But then the 5 days are over. And now she's driving him back to the airport. And he could already see all her tears flushing down her eye. And he goes out. He goes back to overseas. And now she's driving herself back at home. And she's thinking to herself, did this 5 days really happen? You know, it felt like a dream or something because I didn't feel them. So if I would have asked this woman, which one felt longer for you? Those 4 hours at the airport that you were waiting for him, or the 5 days that you actually spent with him? Which one actually felt longer for you? And she would say, definitely the 4 hours I was at the airport waiting for him. That felt like the entire year. But those 5 days, it passed by like seconds. The interesting thing is that the pointer on the watch never went faster, never went slower. It kept going around the same speed. Our emotions, however, changed the way we perceive time. So if I'm waiting for others to change in order for my life to improve, all I'm doing, I am extending my perception of my misery indefinitely with my anxiety. It has no gain whatsoever. There is no psychological gain by expecting someone to change in order for our lives to improve. So this is why this philosophy, the Spiritist philosophy, it's so vital, because it tells us that our happiness does not depend upon others necessarily. We are responsible for it. We are the architects of our own lives. And we are the ones who should take control of our destiny here. And this is why we study reincarnation. We study reincarnation not to concentrate ourselves in the past, not for us to be stuck in the year 1800. We study reincarnation for the simple fact to understand that we are not victims of anything. We are the own cause of everything that happens to us. Our present was shaped by our actions from the past. That's it. We are not here to recollect specifically what we have done. What we hear when we study reincarnation is to understand the reason why we're here and the people that we are with and the profession that we have, the social status we belong to. These aspects of our lives were shaped by our own actions from the past. So we're not a victim here. We are the architects of our own lives. So when we have the wisdom, when we have the courage, when we have the strength to understand that we are the cause of our happiness, everything else changes, because now we're not waiting for others to change for my life to improve. I am doing all the work that I need to improve. So what is the first challenge of self-knowledge? Well, the first challenge of the self-knowledge, it's because I do not want to do any self-knowledge, because it's easier to point fingers at people and tell them they are responsible for my unhappiness or happiness. I don't have to do any work. That's the first challenge. It's way easier for me to blame others and expect the world to change in order for my life to improve. So that's the first challenge. What's the first challenge? Because self-knowledge requires work. It requires sweat. It requires effort from our part. That's the first reason that self-knowledge is difficult. It's a challenge. It's not impossible, but it's a challenge. Now let's get to other reasons why self-knowledge is such a challenge. Allan Kardec, in question 19.8, he was not satisfied with the response because it's a rather succinct response, a rather succinct answer. So in question 19a, he says, we all know the veracity. We all know the maximum of this self-knowledge statement. However, the challenge is to find out who we are. How do we do this? And then, I'm sorry, I referred to Constantine. It's Augustine. Augustine, he goes on to explain that do what I did when I was on the physical plane. Every night when I went to sleep, I prayed and I asked my guardian angel to help me be honest with myself. So before we go to sleep, we are praying, asking for a guardian angel, help me be honest with myself. Because through the lenses of the Spiritist philosophy, a prayer is an action of becoming self-aware. That's one of the definitions of prayer that we get from the Spiritism in its simplest expression. You know that little tiny book? That's what a prayer is. A prayer is. It's a process of becoming self-aware. We think that a prayer, it's actually a verbal debt that we pay to God, as if God needs our prayer. God does not need our prayer. We are the one that needs to pray, but not God. God is not waiting for us to say, let me see if he's grateful or not. Let me see if he's going to ask me or not. That's when we pray, it has nothing to do with a need that God has. It's a need that we human beings have. And in the process of praying, we are becoming self-aware of our own imperfections. So he said, do what I did. When I was on earth, before I went to sleep, I asked my guardian angel to help me be honest with myself. And why did he require his guardian angel to help him to be honest with himself? Well, that's because it's so hard to be honest with ourselves. Why is it hard to be honest with ourselves? Because if we're honest with ourselves, that requires work. It requires effort. Let me just open a parenthesis here. People come to the Spiritist Center and they're sort of waiting for us to give them some sort of a special pass to clean all their problems, or they want to drink some magnetized water and have all the problems solved and have the Spirit solve the problem for them. And I love people and I wish I had that power, but that's not how things work. Work is a law of nature. That's the third chapter in the third part of the Spirit's book. Under moral laws, we have the law of work, and we have to work. When we think of work, we immediately think of someone carrying 2x4s or sweeping the floor or something. But according to that chapter, work, it's any productive activity. Right now, we are working, all of us. And what are we working? We're working our psyche. We're working our personalities. So everything requires work. So I wish when people came to the center, I could just give them a pass and problem solved. But that's not how it works. When we come to the center and someone gives us passes and they give us magnetized water, that alleviates the symptom, but it does not solve the problem because the person will solve the problem themselves. That's how it is. Our spiritual, disobsession meetings, for example, we're not there necessarily to solve the person's problem, because after the spiritual obsessor actually understands, what a waste of my life seeking vengeance with this guy. Look at him. He's moving forward and I'm stuck. I want to get out of here and move forward myself. The spirit finally realizes that he's wasting his own life by doing this. And then he goes on and finds his own destiny. That person that we have helped, if that person doesn't change themselves, a new spirit will come by and continue the obsession process, because that's the way they think. It's the affinity of lower evolved spirits. So once again, just to emphasize the fact that we are not solving someone's problem, because our problems are solved by our own hands. So this requires work. It requires effort. And that is another challenge of self-knowledge, because the amount of work it requires. It's easier for us to point fingers. So when it comes to us making this self-knowledge, it's very hard to be honest, because honesty requires work. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, you know, there is this guy, and he's very, very, very controlling of his wife. He does not allow his wife to have male friends. He does not allow his wife to go out with her female friends. The wife has to constantly attend to his demands. He does not allow her to breathe. So someone comes up to this guy and says, you know, I've noticed you are extremely jealous. This individual will listen to that word, and obviously jealousy has a negative connotation. So he would say, I'm sorry, but I think you're not understanding what I'm doing here. I am not jealous. I am protective. Now, being protective sounds way better than being jealous. So that individual is sugarcoating the emotions they're experiencing. And why? Because if I'm a protective individual, there is nothing to change about me. I could just go on being who I am. But being jealous, on the other hand, that requires effort. And that's because we will now try to make the effort of understanding our partner's need. I personally do not like my freedom to be taken away. Why am I doing this to my wife? We were born free. And whenever someone puts us in their personal cage, in their customized jail, they're actually pushing us away from them, not keeping us closer to them. So this is one of the challenges, to be honest with ourselves. Another emotion that we experience, and we manipulate what we're experiencing very much, it's envy. And what is envy? Envy is when we are disturbed by other people's happiness. So let's say you start off working with a friend at the same company, and after 6 months, your friend gets promoted and you don't. So suddenly you feel very sad and you cannot pinpoint why. You go home and it's the weekend, and now you're depressed the entire Saturday, Sunday, and then you don't feel like going back to work on Monday. And then someone asks you, what's wrong? And there's nothing. Nothing is wrong. I think I catch a cold or something. This is what I'm feeling. Well, you're catching a cold. The solution is medication. But it will be very hard for that person to admit, I'm actually very upset that my friend got promoted and I didn't. So let's say, two individuals arrived from Brazil, and I see everyone is Brazilian here, so I'm going to give you this example. If we had an English-speaking only person, I'll never use this example. So two individuals arrived from Brazil in Vancouver, and one person works very hard and the other person does not work at all. They start working 7 days a week. Within 6 months, they're working only 4 days a week because they need to enjoy Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is kind of common in here in the US. So after a while, the person that worked really hard invites the other person to their home. And the other person is going there who hasn't purchased anything, who hasn't acquired no assets of any kind, goes in there to visit this person's home that they just purchased. And one day I was waiting for a haircut, and I was reading this magazine of empty material. And in that magazine said that only poor people show their homes to strangers. Rich people, because they always had it, they don't care who comes in their home and sees what they have. But poor people, whenever you invited to their homes, they want to make sure that you see each corner of their home. So this person grabs their friend by their neck and says, now you have to see this entire house. And they take them to the attic. And now they show all the space in the attic. And then they take them to the basement, and they're showing all the space in the basement. Then they take them to the kitchen. They're opening all the kitchen cabinets, and they make sure they tell you how many plates they could put in that chicken cabinet. No, here, look, I could put 20 plates in here and 40 cups there. They're showing all this stuff. Meanwhile, the other friend is very quiet. It's not saying anything. Very upset. Goes home, gets depressed. What is that a sign of, my friends? Envy. And if this person actually gets treated with depression medication because they're so envious of other people's success, that medication will not solve the problem. What will solve the problem here is self-knowledge. Why am I an envious individual? You know, Emmanuel, through the hands of Francisco Xavier, taught us a very important lesson. And this is what he says, that it's easier for us to cry with those who are crying than to laugh with those who are laughing. And what he means by this is that when there is someone in need of help, your neighbor calls you and says, you know, I need your help. You see someone in need on the street and you give them help. After you provide the help, these individuals, they massage your ego to such an extent that you feel so good about yourself. They might look at you and says, oh my God, you are an angel on earth to me. What I would do without you. And obviously these affirmations make us feel great about ourselves. But if we see someone who is actually happier than we are, we haven't purchased our home and then we visit their home, we are still riding a bike and they have a nice Mercedes, a BMW, and they invite you for a ride, it's very, very difficult to actually be happy with other people's happiness. Because that in itself, it's a source of comparison of where you stand in life. But then Emmanuel gives us this technique in order to free ourselves from envy. He says, develop the habit of being happy with other people's happiness. Because if I have the habit of being unhappy with people's happiness, wherever I go, I'll find reasons to be unhappy. In the sports arena, for example, if I'm a runner, and then I get very upset with people who are faster than me, I'm always upset. I'm always unhappy. You know, I think of Usain Bolt, the fastest man on earth. You know, how envious are the guys around him when he wins. You know, any realm of human activity, we might find someone who's doing something better than we are. And if we're not happy for their achievements, you know, we will always find reasons to be very miserable. So Emmanuel gives us this technique to develop the habit of being happy with other people's happiness. And why is that? Well, because through the process of self-knowledge, what I would find out that this other individual that I experience envy from, it's not a person that was created by some other God. It's not someone who is special in the sense that God created this person with different abilities and capabilities. We all have the same origin. We all have the same Father. In the Lord's Prayer, we say, our Father. Well, what we're affirming, if it's our Father, that means we're all brothers and sisters automatically. So we all have the same Father. We all have the same origin. So why am I experiencing envy when that person has the same beginning that I had? If we find ourselves in different social status, in different intellect abilities, maybe this was just a result of effort who placed more effort, who used their free will in a wise way. Or maybe the other person that is so ahead of me intellectually is just because he's a spirit that was born before me. But there is no reason to experience envy, be angry because that person knows or has more things that I do. When it comes to knowledge, maybe this is a person who study more. But when it comes to material wealth, we have to be very careful, because through the Spiritist knowledge, we found out that it's a challenge to be rich. It's a challenge to be poor and to be rich, but it's definitely more challengeable to be rich. Just because being rich, one has more opportunities to do good. And if we don't, we are more responsible for it. So why should I envy someone that has more than me? It does not make sense from the Spiritist perspective. So that's it, my friends. And one of the biggest challenge of self-knowledge is the fact that we will have this proclivity, this tendency to actually place on others the responsibility that is ours. And no one can do the work for us. We know God loves us infinitely. We know our guardian angel loves us infinitely, but they will not do the work for us. Reason being is because they know it's through work that we develop ourselves intellectually and morally. If you find a teacher who has a group of students, and usually that teacher would teach the theory for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, and at the end of the week, at the end of the month, the teacher will give them an exam. What is the purpose of the exam? Is it to make the students suffer? Is it to punish the students for something wrong they did? No. The function of the exam is to solidify the theory in their minds. They're proving to themselves they have learned the material. So let's say there is a student there, and the student is struggling with his exam. And now the teacher feels sorry for the student. And he actually grabs the exam from the student and says, let me do it for you. And he solves all the problem for the student. Who has the merit of solving the problem? Is it the teacher or the student? Of course it's the teacher. Has the teacher helped the student? No. The teacher did him much intellectual harm by solving the problems for him. If that's not enough, when a child is learning the first steps, what happens? The child falls down on their little butt, on their behind. And the child stands up again and falls again, and stands up and falls again. If the child was actually able to talk and ask the child, how do you feel? And the child would say, I feel horrible. It hurts me. That's what the child would say. And let's say if the mother felt sorry for the child, and she actually grabbed the little boy, little girl by their two arms, and they're doing all the walk for them. And now the child is 7 years old, and they're still doing the walk for that child. What happens when the mother releases their arms? The child will fall back. And why is that? Because in the process of falling and getting up, that's how our muscle in the legs are strengthened to make walk possible. And the same applies for spiritual evolution. Our spiritual evolution is not in a straight line. It's made up of falls and ups, downs and ups. We just have to make sure that our next down is not as down as the last down. It's up and down, but the next down, it is not on the same level of my last down. And I do this by rediscovering myself, knowing my potential. So in regards to self-knowledge, I only concentrated here on what we call as negative emotions. But I don't like to use this word negative, because all these emotions, they have a purpose. It's like the instruments in your car. if the instrument in your car shows to you that the gas is low, that's not a negative instrument. It's a very useful instrument that tells you to stop in the gas station. So envy tells something about me. I feel inferior than people. Why? So it provides me with a useful information of me. Jealousy, it's a very useful information about me. It tells me that I'm insecure. And why am I insecure? What happened to me in the past? Why do I feel this way? It brings me a very important information about me. This is why I don't like to use the word negative emotions. But let's concentrate here a bit on the positive as well, because when you read the answer to 19.8 question, Augustine will also let you know that he also examined what he did throughout that day. Before he went to sleep, he prayed, please help me to be honest with myself, and let me examine the things that I have done negative, things that I regret, things that will make me feel guilty, things that I would not approve if someone else did to me. But then he said, I will also examine the positive things I have done. If I had helped someone, if someone actually paid a compliment to me, because to have the self-knowledge is also to be aware of our progress, because only to concentrate in things that are negative, it's unhealthy. So we want to concentrate as well, the things that I do. And we start by small tasks, small achievements, oh my God, I no longer curse. I used to use profanity a lot, but now I don't. Well, that is progress. What happens in the Spiritism, whenever you delve into this knowledge, you always setting yourself new goals that you don't realize that you have achieved old goals you have established for yourself. But it's very important, it's extremely healthy to realize that we have established these goals, we have achieved them, because our eyes are so concentrated in the future that we don't realize the achievements of our present. So self-knowledge, my friends, it's a challenge. It's not something that we do within a week, within a month. It's not something that we say, I finished, that's it. I've done enough in this reincarnation. Because since we are constantly moving forward, we are evolving, there is always something new to learn about us, new potential. We have the seeds of perfection within us, and these seeds will sprout in direct proportion to the effort that we are exercising in making ourselves a better version of who we are. And I wish that all of your meetings, the Vancouver group, all of your meetings aim to that purpose. All of our meetings have one purpose, to console and to help us become a better version of ourselves. So it's been 50 minutes. And I do not want to tire you guys. So thank you so much for your attention.